This is a small sketch of the original Haywain by Constable, which is in chiaroscuro, which is brown and white on the red bowl canvas, and a 5 and 20-minute sketch. I'm not saying this to explain that I've done it very quickly, but this is about the speed Constable would have made the eventual sketch for his Haywain. He made about 4. But prior to the sketches for the Haywain in chiaroscuro, he would have made extensive sketches in pencil, mainly, and oil-colour sketches on paper. Also enlisting the aid of his assistant, Johnny Dunthorne, who lived in East Bergholt whilst Constable was living in Hampstead. And there's a letter extant in which Constable asked Johnny to paint or draw a wain. So he went down to the mill. This was probably actually happened that the horses were not being watered as much as the wheels were being soaked with water because of the hot summer's day. And in those days, of course, it was deeper because it was a mill pond. And the sluice gates came from just here, down there, and on this side, extant again today. This is Willie Lott's cottage. Here is Constable's home then. Behind us is the mill. And across here, in the original Haywain, is a haywain. This is a scarf. It's called a scarf. It's a general purpose wagon. The actual name of the painting was called Landscape Noon. It was given the name Haywain because the scarf was used with little piece of wood around it in order to take the hay. So it's got a false name, which doesn't mean to say it's a false painting, except that it wasn't done on the spot. In point of fact, a 6 feet by 5 canvas would have blown in the water in the first 10 minutes, I should imagine, with East Anglia. But here, in the original, Constable was made from the outside closet, Willie Lott's house. They didn't have much in the way of plumbing in those days. He's turned it into a brick wall with a pretty little elder tree to hide the true nature of the building. But the rest of the building, which is today used as a student's hostel, still remains. The trees, more or less the same, except everything's higher. And you can no longer see this exact spot. There's a little chap here fishing, or sorting out the reeds, something like that. Originally, there was a horse here, which now in the original, which is in the National Gallery, has become impedimenta, has turned from the horse that was there into a barrel, but Constable altered his mind and painted a barrel over the horse. He asked for it. It was purchased by a man named Arrowsmith, who was, strange enough, was a French dealer with another painting of, I think, £250 of Guinness. And, but the beauty of it was, and when Constable wrote to Fisher, his friend, in relation to this, and Leslie is also an RA, about it, they said, well, at least you will get fame because the French love painting more than the English, which of course is quite true to this day. And so when it was shown in the Salon, he received a gold medal and an enormous amount of acclaim. 7 years ago, I decided to paint the Haywain in reverse to celebrate his bicentenary in 1976, because it's wonderful to apparently walk into a picture, turn round and see the artist painting it. I actually sketched the Haywain in reverse with the landscape behind it, extensive views of trees and meadows and God knows what. And then I transferred this to the canvas in the usual way of squaring up, and was happily about 4 months through it, and an old ploughman came in for a cup of tea in the adjacent cafe. And my friend told him I was painting Constable's Haywain, and I was worried about the traces on the horses, which I didn't know a lot about. He said, oh, I'll have a look at them for him. And he came in and shook his head and said, you ever been down to Flatford, Master? I said, no. He said, well, I suggest you go down there, because he said, there ain't no trees behind the mill pond at Willie Lott's cottage, there's buildings. I said, oh, no. And I walked down there, and to my horror, saw this beautiful building. So I made the sketch and then a little rough sketch in colour, and thought I might just as well plod on with the big original painting. This is the preparatory drawing done on the red bowl in line in white chalk, although I've used other white just to help the television. This looks over elaborate, but you see all the perspective lines here are necessary because there are courses of brickwork going in recessive perspective across there. Also, the wane itself has a vanishing point. In order to achieve this, I attack a nail physically into the stretcher, which keeps the thing going for you. There's dark, light, and medium. With those three tones quietly and carefully placed in the right places with a bit of luck, the picture starts to take on, you use fresh brushes for the new tones, takes on a different aspect because now one can, although this appears quite light, one can start drawing the salient points in the painting with a certain knowledge that what is underneath will stay, with a certain knowledge that the perspective which lines have helped you, are helping you to achieve truth, veracity. And if this is applied very quietly, patiently, one can achieve, before photography, remember, a photographic negative which, when coloured, this painting is now in the state of grisaille, in which it now requires dead colouring. Dead colouring means that one places the colour over the painting in areas to give one an idea how it will look ultimately if one trusts. And to cheer you up, as there's a piece of red here, we'll start with that. I'm using a relatively limited palette. Constable would have sketched this in very, very quickly in the open somewhere first, on oil paper, not canvas. At this stage, when all the forms are drawn in, and of course, remember one can merge this with the finger or brush if you want to make more subtle movements anywhere. And but the good thing is to get dark and light first and then the intermediate. It depends how you feel about it. But at some stage it's a good idea to apply the palette knife as we did in the Temeraire, as one does often. And this is a little difficult, but just imagine water is spurting up under the horse's feet. And the source of light coming from up here again will tell the story itself. You splash it up just the same as you're in a bath throwing the water at your wife or something. They describe what I'm doing now as penciling. They call these pencils, which is very disconcerting for anyone reading manuscripts. And so we go through the picture like this. The painting has been carried about as far as it's possible for demonstration purposes, because it would take quite a considerable time to finish it off. Remember that Constable took about 3 months to paint the Hayway with all the odds and ends going on. So I'm going to turn to this painting, which took me longer than it took Constable to paint the Hayway, because there is, of course, much more detail, too much possibly, in it. You see that by the general aspect that some thought has gone into the design generally of the painting, the movement, the colour, the drawing, and so on. And when I give it a coat of varnish later, it will again bring out the tones to their true values. This is about, I think, 5 years since I painted this.